Good morning, everyone. Welcome. It is FPC Radio Live. It's Thursday, June 22nd. And John, just when we thought we were entering the absolute dead of the sports year, especially when it comes to, a radio show that primarily talks about sports, the NBA on I guess the eve, technically the eve of the NBA draft. I mean, maybe it leaked into the day of the NBA draft, gave us a pretty big significant trade. The Celtics trading Marcus Smart and receiving Kristaps Porzingis, Marcus Smart to Memphis, and getting Kristaps Porzingis in the end. So, John, I'll throw it to you. I'll ask you right off the bat. I mean, what's your reaction to this trade? And I mean, is it on the surface? It looks like a really good trade for the Celtics, despite giving up one of their more fan favorite players. They get a pretty good player in return on top of a couple draft picks. So thoughts, concerns, anything?
I feel like George Costanza, trying to trade for Griffey and Barnes without giving up too much, when he thought he was going to be assistant general manager. Yeah, see that? Look, Marcus Smart, the last few years have been in favor of moving him. I like him as a player. I don't love him as a player. I think he values himself a bit too much, that he's the leader of the team and part of the big three, which he's not. The problem with Marcus Smart, Jaylen Brown, and Jason Tatum is I've always felt they were like three brothers, and Marcus Smart's the oldest one. So until that oldest brother goes away to college or gets married, the other two brothers sometimes feel suffocated by the older brother, or the oldest brother in this case. Jaylen Brown does appear to have like middle child syndrome, like he's just constantly looking for attention and be part of it. And Jason Tatum is the young one who is spoiled and cute and everybody loves. So I was in favor of moving him, getting Kristaps Porzingis. It can be a really high level addition. It can also be a disappointment because he's not the most durable guy. He's been in the league 8 years. He's only played 400 plus games. So he averages roughly 50 games per year. Last year, coming off a very good season, though, where he averaged 23 points, 8.5 rebounds, 3 assists, and a block and a half. So you can look at it and say, okay, maybe he's healthy now. He's played 65 games. He had a good year. But you also have to factor in that he was playing in Washington where no one was paying attention. So getting Porzingis for Smart, I think, is a good move. But you also get 2 first-round picks that maybe you can flip into a veteran player going forward. And you rid yourself of contracts with Danilo Gallinari and Mike Muscala as well to make this all work. So I think it's a really good trade for the Celtics. But again, it all depends on how durable Kristaps Porzingis is. But that's kind of what we talk about with every NBA player, right? Because so many of these guys don't play a lot. 65 games, if you know now that he's going to play 65 games this season, it's a really good deal.
Well, and that's the thing, too. Fortunately for the Celtics, it isn't as much as it's the a big part of the trade, like you said. I mean, they have a pair of first-round picks. So my gut tells me is they're probably not done yet. And I think the next question, try to put yourself in Brad Stevens' shoes. Do they want to go out and get I hate using the term real or true point guard, but I don't have a better way to describe it. Because they have, Derek White can play the point. I mean, I'm just saying, do they go out? I don't, do I think that they can afford Fred Van Fleet? No. But do they go out and say, all right, we want a guy that can control the ball up and down the court. We want that guy. Do they go out and do that?
Well, I think they figure that you could still run your offense through Jason Tatum. I mean, I would prefer that they did find someone who was more of that position. Now, Chris Paul is going to go by Washington at some point, whether he's released or traded. So maybe that's part of it. And the Celtics now have some sort of relationship with Washington because they traded for Kristaps Porzingis, and now Paul is part of the Wizards. So maybe he's an option, or just, a veteran player who's playing for less money that can come in and even come off the bench and be that guy. Yeah, as of now, you would think Derek White, Jaylen Brown's your backcourt, Porzingis and Tatum are your forwards, and then you go with most likely Al Horford, or if it's Rob Williams III as your starting center, and then your bench is whichever big guy doesn't start. And you also have to see what the story is with Malcolm Brogdon, who was essentially traded last night, but then sent back, which kind of is an awkward situation. And then you also have to monitor what happens with Grant Williams. Sure, I would prefer to have more of a natural floor leader than Derek White. But again, that's something that may drop during the offseason with some sort of veteran player.
Yeah, and that's why I say with so many questions still kind of hanging over, I do think that the Celtics. I mean, I think we can get a pretty good grasp of who Brad Stevens is as a executive, and he's a guy who's going to go out and make a move. This isn't who's a guy who's going to sit back. It's not Danny Ainge, who overvalued draft pick. Oh well, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it's not Danny Ainge, who, again, maybe he sat on his hands a little bit too much. Maybe he wasn't as active as he should have been during his reign running this team. And we've seen that Brad Stevens is willing to go out and get the guys he thinks. And quite frankly, trading Marcus Smart kind of tells you that he's not going to. Because you think about it, this was not an easy thing to do. I know we've talked about trading Marcus Smart, and that's often been a topic of discussion because, again, when you have a team like the Celtics team who has been consistently really, really good, John, but has really nothing to show for it, you cannot continue to roll out the same team. And I'm not just talking about swapping out role players. I'm talking about, well, you have to look at the foundation and the makeup of this team and wonder, well, do you have to go out and make that difficult trade? Do you have to go trade Nomar, John? And am I comparing Marcus Smart to Nomar, the player? No, but Marcus Smart's still a reigning, or not reigning, but a former defensive player of the year. He's a really good player. And at the time, Nomar was as much of the Red Sox as the Red Sox were to Boston. So it was difficult to see him move, certainly for players that were collectively a good group, but not individually as good as Nomar. But we saw what it did for that team. And it ultimately led to them getting over that hump, that 86-year-old hump that was just looming. So, if you're a Celtics fan, if you're watching this, you want this to be Nomar. You want this to be okay. And it doesn't mean that they have to go out and win, but something had to change, Sean. Something had to change, and you're not gonna achieve that change by just swapping out, like I said, role players. You had to do something fairly bold, and I think that this was pretty bold.
Yeah, I like the Nomar comparison because Nomar was so part of the Red Sox, and they'd had some success. They'd gone to the playoffs a few times. The year before, they lost the American League Championship Series, a heartbreaking loss to the Yankees. And I remember when Nomar was traded back in July of 2004, there were people crying because he was such a popular player. I think he fell out of favor a little bit, maybe with the organization, as is the case oftentimes with Red Sox players. The longer they stay here, the more sour they get. But yeah, that's a great comparison. And 3 months later, they were winning their first World Series in 86 years. And I think when you look at Marcus Smart, he's such a polarizing player. Many of the fans love him. He's their favorite player, and there are other fans that would rather see him get moved. Well, they're celebrating today after he got moved late last night. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with him in Memphis, how he reacts to this trade. He seems to be a guy who's going to get worked up about this and put his best foot forward when he joins the Memphis Grizzlies next season.
Yeah, and look, I mean, one thing you might be concerned with this Celtics team is, maybe this is a little overrated, but are you worried that, maybe their grittiness? I mean, you still have Grant Williams. Maybe he can kind of, really
for now.
Yeah, for now.
He could be gone too.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and that's the thing. Do you worry that this team is, dare I say it, a little too soft now? Because I mean, who's the guy who's going to get in the face? Because we know, look, this isn't football, this isn't hockey, this isn't, you know what I mean? It's not the type of sport where you're gonna, in hockey you fight, in football it's just constant physicality. But there is a physical nature to basketball, and do you think the Celtics lack that right now? Because Marcus Smart was kind of like that driving force. Now here it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing, John. Okay, is it going to be bad that you lack that grit? Sure. However, is that going to outweigh the benefits of maybe, like, kind of like you said, eliminating that belief by Marcus Smart that he's more than what he is. And it's not, we're not trying to pile on Marcus Smart. It's just sometimes you can just, maybe you value yourself a little bit more, and that can have a negative effect. So what's more valuable, losing that, or what's less concerning? Or now I'm confusing myself essentially. But I hope you know what I'm trying to say.
I know exactly what you're talking about. No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you have to weigh that, right? So Marcus Smart was a guy who, was a tough guy on the court, gave you that grit, because the rest of the team does appear to be soft. Jason Tatum's a phenomenal basketball player, but he's not a get-in-your-face type of guy.
Yeah.
Jaylen Brown kind of keeps to himself. Now you're adding Kristaps Porzingis, who's been accused of being soft himself, despite being 7'3". He plays more of a wing-type game. I mean, he can score in the low post, but like most big guys now, they play with their facing the basket. Maybe you go out and sign someone there. And I do think Grant Williams is probably a goner. I don't know if they want to commit to 4 years and $60 million to Grant Williams. We'll have to see how that shakes out over the next several hours, perhaps. But yeah, you're going to have to go find some sort of veteran who maybe has won somewhere, who gives you that type of edge. I mean, they throw the name of Patrick Beverly out there, but he hasn't won anything. And sometimes he seems more to be a nuisance than
I'll pass.
Honest contributor. Yeah, he's a little bit too much, right? I mean, he's actually will cost this team games with suspensions and technicals and a lot of crazy stuff. So yeah, I always throw the name of PJ Tucker out there, but right now he's a member of the 76ers. Veteran guys, won a championship, knows his role. If you can find that type of player, then you go ahead and get them to try to give you that grit that you are losing by trading Marcus Smart.
Yeah, and look, that's we have so much time between now and when the season actually gets going. Like I said, I do not believe that they are done. There's got to be more to all this, because again, like I said, I mean, this is a team that's kind of at that desperation stage. Not like, oh my God, we have to, well, I mean, it kind of is. I mean, you got to win. I mean, at this point, what else can you do to achieve more? And it's you have to win, John.
Right.
And like I said, I this isn't like I mean, look, Jason Tatum's going to have a long career. This is we're going to look back and say, oh, remember 10 years ago when Jason Tatum was only 24 and he was coming off 5 conference finals. Like, we're going to look back and still be impressed by it. But at the same time, it's like, this group, you have a great opportunity to win. I mean, we saw it this year. They had a great opportunity. Now it's like, okay, well, do you roll out? And we said this at the end of the season. You can't roll out the same foundational group as you did the last 4 or 5 years, because something isn't working. And does this mean Marcus Smart was a problem? No. It just means that, like, sometimes, just like with coaching, sometimes you just need a new voice. Sometimes you just need to shake up that roster kind of uncomfortably, but it ultimately has a bigger impact. So, again, it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. We obviously know, more so in hockey than in basketball, but we know that the regular season really doesn't mean all that much. I mean, do what you're supposed to do, make the playoffs, and the important thing is being healthy and playing the right way during the postseason. So it's going to be a long several months of guessing and second guessing and all that about what's going to happen with this team. But quite frankly, I think they've. It shows me, their actions now show me that they're not going to sit around and wait for things to happen. I think they're going to be very proactive this offseason, and I think we're going to be looking at a relatively different Celtics team.
Yeah, the whole thing too, Ian, is really the last 5 years. You can look at it and say that the league is more wide open now than it's been in decades, right? Because really from the late 80s to the mid 2010s, you just had teams repeating and winning back to back, and several of them winning 3 straight. And it was the same group of teams that were always in the finals. The last 5 years, you've gone Toronto, Lakers, Milwaukee, Golden State, and now Denver. So this is wide open, and you can make a case that over the last 5 years, the Celtics are now the best team that doesn't have a championship. So you don't want to be in that category. You don't want to be the team equivalent of, say, Elgin Baylor, Charles Barkley, Karl Malone, Patrick Ewing, all those great players that never won a championship. So it is time you have to break through. The old expression is you got to poop or get off the pot. Well, I think Brad Stevens is looking at this and saying we've got to change some things about this team, not just the talent, but also the makeup of the team. to give it a little bit of a shake and give it a fresh look, and you go from there.
Yeah, you certainly do not want to be the let's say the Bruins of the NHL. Sadly, it's a very apt comparison, but that's a perfect way for me to segue into our hockey segment because we have our guy Jim Behringer, the voice of Full Press Hockey, excuse me, on the air now. And Jim, we didn't have an opportunity to really dive into the Stanley Cup final finish last week. But we also have some Hall of Fame news and good news and some, again, questionable decisions by the Hall of Fame and some of the stances that they're making. So real first, we'll start with the Stanley Cup because, that's still somewhat fresh in everyone's mind. I know it feels like a long time ago, although we did have a pretty interesting finish to the Calder Cup finals last night or very early this morning, however you want to look at it, depending on what time zone you're in. But first, Vegas, it's been about a week since they hoisted the cup. Any thoughts concerning just how they're going to approach the offseason and what you think that the lasting power is for this team? Because, I mean, I know the popular thing is as soon as the Stanley Cup Finals is over, is be like, oh, yeah, can Vegas repeat? Well, can Vegas repeat? Can they get back there?
Look, the ending of the Stanley Cup Finals is what everybody expected. Look, we talked about it on this show, talked it on Full Press, the weekly show with Chris. Vegas was the better team. Hands down, they were the better team. Florida just ran out of steam. 10 days off, guys getting hurt, guys playing through injuries. Kachuk, broken sternum, shoulders. Aaron Ekblad, dislocated shoulder, torn oblique, and broken foot. And the list goes on of guys that were hurt. But Vegas was the better team, top to bottom. They rolled 4 lines. Bruce Cassidy's system, you play defense, clog up the middle, take away the middle of the ice, take away good scoring chances. Aiden Hill was unbelievable. Vegas, first time in 6 years, first expansion team, Bill Foley's cup in 6 years. Boom, there it is. Cup in 6 years, 5 playoff appearances in 6 years, 2 trips to the Stanley Cup final. This is a modern day expansion team. What they're doing is not being talked about enough because, we've never seen this in any sport. Aiden Hill was amazing what they did. They go through 5 goaltenders, like similar to what they did in the first year where they used 9 guys. But again, the system allows these goaltenders to play well. And look, Hill made saves that he needed to make. Like, plain and simple. He made the saves that he needed to make. He made the timely saves. In another system, he probably gets exposed like we saw in Arizona and San Jose. But he made the saves he needed to make. This team is probably coming back intact next year. Again, a couple of UFAs. You have Ivan Barbashev. That's going to be a difficult contract. I know Vegas wants to bring him back. Again, what's going to be the AAV? How are they going to get him in under cost? He's making $2.5 million now. Reasonable contract. He's going to get probably somewhere between $4 and $5 million on his next contract for what he's done and what he's shown. He's opened up a lot of eyes. Aiden Hill's the UFA. Are they going to bring him back? What are they going to do with Robin Leonard and Logan Thompson? So there's a lot of question marks for Kelly McCrimmon. I doubt they go big game hunting as they've done in the past. That's what they've seemed to be doing. But I don't see why this team can't come back for another run next year. I mean, it seems like they're always in the playoffs. They're always in contention. They kind of flew under the radar this year. And Bruce Cassidy behind the bench. I mean, look, this guy can win. And I still think it was a mistake. As much as Jim Montgomery had a great season in Boston, I still think it was a mistake. Because, look, everybody wants to talk about what the players against – no. Let's get that narrative out of the window. Patrice Bergeron was called by Kelly McCrimmon to be asked about what Bruce Cassidy is. Bergeron's like, you're going to win a Stanley Cup. So that's all you need to know about Bergeron, the Bruins, and Cassidy and what happened there. Look, this guy is a Stanley Cup winning coach. He's a great coach in the league. I don't see why they can't come back.
Now, right before you got on the air, you heard part of it, and those listening were listening to it. We were talking about the Celtics and kind of, I did mention the Bruins, so maybe this will be the answer to the question I'm about to ask you. But is there, a team out there you can see shaking up the makeup, so to speak? We saw the Celtics trade Marcus Smart, a foundational player for the franchise. But do you see an NHL team out there doing something very similar that's been essentially knocking on the door and can't get over the hump? Like I said, I compared the Celtics to the Bruins for the fact that, well, over the past 5 to 10 years, there's not too many teams that have a better regular season record than those teams in their respective sports. However, they have zero to show for it in terms of championships. So, like I said, maybe the Bruins are your answer. Maybe there's another team out there. But what team could you see making a pretty bold trade or a bold set of moves to hopefully get over that hump?
I'm looking at Carolina, to be honest. I think they've been in the Eastern Conference Final now. 0-8 in the last 2 trips. So you go back even further, 0-12. It seems like they run into the Eastern Conference Final and they just can't get past that hump. I would not be shocked if they go out and make a move. They understand they need to add more offense. Things didn't work out for them. Brett Pesce on the back end, he needs a new deal. Could they move him out and bring in somebody else? They're not afraid to make moves. They're not afraid to just bring in different personnel and get back to the playoffs and do that again. I would be shocked, Carolina. See, the thing with Boston for me is like they're on a back end of things, even though they're like there still. Like the answers around Bergeron and Krejci, like that's going to change the dynamic. What about Tyler Bertuzzi, Orlov? Like those guys, they're probably hitting the market. If they can bring them back, they're going to have to bring them in cost. That means the guy like Taylor Hall's going out. And I mean, that could be the shakeup that they need to move a guy like Hall out to bring in something to get them over the hump as well and keep them contention. What does Pittsburgh do? Toronto, what are they going to do? Got a lot of things or a lot of moving pieces, especially consider like for me, like New Jersey, for instance, take the Devils. If they land Connor Hellebuck, that's going to put them over the edge in that that division and that conference because you have a guy that could play 65 games. He's good. He makes the Devils a contender again and keeps them in contention because we know what he can do. And he's a number one and you can let Schmid develop. And now there's a nice dynamic there. And now the Devils defense in front of them, you move a piece here and there, get some guys in. You're talking about a team that's going to be really, really tough to beat. So again, a lot of eyes on Winnipeg. Where's the Brinket go? So I would say Carolina for now, but you can throw the Devils in there too.
Yeah, again, it seems like a lot of these teams happen to reside in the East.
Yeah.
A lot of these teams that are really trying desperately to get over the hump, and in some cases get over the hump again. But it's going to get interesting in the NHL because we know we're back to kind of normal. July 1st is free agency day. It's back to being a national holiday among us who celebrate. Or at least it should be a national holiday. But last night or yesterday, we got the Hall of Fame announcement. And look, as a former, and actually, I always say still a goalie at heart. I mean, I still wake up and, practice my reaction skills and everything like that. But 3 goalies getting into the Hall of Fame, and that makes me happy. But also the continued reluctance to put Russian-born players or Russian nationalized players into the Hall. Alexander Mogilny, a prime example of someone I'm sure you have many strong feelings about. It's a very, like I said when I brought it up earlier in the show, it's a very great and unfortunately just exhausting moment when the Hall of Fame for hockey is announced.
Yeah, I mean, look, Henrik Lundqvist, Mike Vernon, Tom Barrasso, guys are deserving. Pierre Turgeon finally gets his due. Caroline Ouellette, Ken Hitchcock in the builders category with Pierre Lacroix. I mean, look, Mogilny is a hockey Hall of Famer. Like, let's put all the other stuff out. Take the politics out of it, right? And I know it's going to be tougher for Russians to get in, and I know all this stuff. But if you look at his resume and you line up his resume, we all talk about resumes and we talk about greatest of all time, all this stuff. 1.04 points per game. That's just a little over what Pierre Turgeon did. He, 1,000 points, 1,000 games played, Stanley Cup. Oh, by the way, he has a Olympic gold medal, a world championship gold medal, a world junior gold medal. So he's a member of the triple gold, quadruple gold club. There's a lot of guys, those members are in the Hockey Hall of Fame. So to me, what he did to get here, he put his life on the line. He defected. Buffalo Sabres drafted him to get him in here into Buffalo. He scored 76 goals in his rookie season with Buffalo. I mean, how many guys are putting up 70 goals now? Not too many guys. And last I checked, all the guys that scored 75 goals or more are in the Hockey Hall of Fame. So he definitely deserves to be in. I know it's a process. I know it's always tougher for the Russians to get in, just because. But it's the Hockey Hall of Fame. It's not the NHL Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
And international stats matter, and international hockey matters. And there's a lot of great players that have played the game that were of the former Soviet Union that are not in the Hockey Hall of Fame because, whatever you want to say. And I understand what's going on in the world and I get it. But you also have to realize that there's a chance to do something right here, and you put a guy in that needs to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. On numbers alone, this guy's been eligible since 2009. I still don't know how he wasn't a first ballot Hockey Hall of Famer. So again, the wait continues for Alexander McGillney, guys like Keith Kitchuk, Rob Brindamore. But to me, again, if we're talking about a Hockey Hall of Fame and we're talking about the best players to ever play the game, Alexander McGillney needs to be in the Hockey Hall of Fame. I'm sorry, but he does.
Yeah, politics should have nothing to do with anything like that. Look, I'm a proponent of putting the steroid era baseball players in the Hall of Fame because, well, again, it was part of the legacy of the game, and I think Hall of Fames aren't meant to pick sides. They're supposed to tell the story of their respective sport. And I know that the cliche, can you tell the story of this league without this player? Yeah, I'm not saying it in that sense, but I mean, like, look, the steroid era in baseball was real. Okay. It happened. A lot of people were involved outside of just the players, so you can't just ignore it. And some of the greatest players in this league's history, in that league's history, came from that. So, of course, when it comes to politics, it should never, never become a part of the conversation when you're talking about a Hall of Fame for a sport, because all it should be about is that player's accomplishments and what they did in that sport. And I know it gets dicey when you're talking about guys like, say, OJ Simpson in the NFL, but like, I'm staying consistent, and it's like, look, I understand, like, you can have a moral objection to him being a Hall of Famer or whatever, but look, if we're going to go and nitpick about every player's background and everything like that, trust me, there are a lot of old baseball players that would not be in the Hall of Fame that are somewhat celebrated and revered today. So to me, I think just across the board, you need to forget about politics. I don't care about Alexander Mogilny's, where he was born and what his country is doing. That's not for me to, sit there and debate on this platform. A different platform, sure, we can have those conversations, but we're not talking about that. You know what I mean? Alexander Mogilny wasn't out there leading the charge. He wasn't doing this. And look, even if he was, I don't care, because it's about what he did on the ice. And when I say I don't care, it's not that I don't care about what's going on. It's that I don't care in the context of, is he a Hockey Hall of Famer or not? So does his resume in terms of what he did on the ice qualify him? Absolutely. So my answer is yes. He was a Hockey Hall of Famer. I don't care what his country did. I don't care what God, I'm going to sound very like just, cold-hearted, but like, I don't necessarily care what OJ Simpson did off the football field. I don't necessarily care about what those guys did. Choose to celebrate them how you celebrate them, but don't ignore it, because for better or worse, they are a part of what this game was and what you're trying to, I guess, remember it and put up and accomplish. But in the case of Alexander Mogilny, he has the most like loose affiliation with something bad. I mean, the guy just happened to be born where he was born, and he's being punished for it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, if you've seen his story and you've heard about his story, I mean, this guy defected middle of the night, put his family on the line, put himself on the line to go play in the National Hockey League, to play against the best players in the world. What he did with Buffalo Sabres, what he did with the Vancouver Canucks, he revitalized his career in New Jersey. The trade that brings him here, plays with Scott Gomez, wins the Stanley Cup, goes back to another Stanley Cup final. Oh, by the way, what he does in Toronto, goes to the Eastern Conference final with them. So this guy, I mean, consistently just one of the best hockey players ever to play the game. And again, these Russian guys that have come over and defected and, have played in this game, continue to wait because, you want to call arrogance, you want to call snobbery. I don't know what you want to say, but if we're talking about Hall of Fame, I know I get on the baseball writers a lot. I'm going to get on the committee too. I mean, it's a tough job. I understand that. But this guy's been waiting since 2009. What is taking so long? It was like with Pat Burns. What is taking so long to get Pat Burns in the Hockey Hall of Fame? Why did it have to be until he died that they needed to get him in the Hockey Hall of Fame? Like, Pierre Lacroix should have been in as a builder a long time ago. Like, to let him celebrate it. Mike Vernon, he's a great goaltender. I understand that. But again, are we looking at the Hall of Very Good or are we looking at the Hockey Hall of Fame? I like Mike Vernon. I do. I think he's a good goaltender. Is he a Hall of Famer? Well, now he is. But stats-wise, I don't know.
Yeah, and look, I mean, and that's the thing. And that's it's unfortunate because you're seeing the same sort of issues in some other leagues hall, or not. I don't want to say other leagues halls because they don't belong to the league, but other sports Hall of Fames, where it's like, what are you valuing? Like there's and yeah, Kyle, it's a great point. I was thinking it myself. Was he actually even better than Chris Osgood?
Yeah, I mean, look, Chris Osgood won 3 Stanley Cups. Obviously, he was the backup in '97. But he took over for Vernon in '98 and won in 2008 too when he came back to Detroit. I mean, I know Detroit teams were loaded, and I know Vernon stood on his head in '89 and he played really well in '97 and won the Conn Smythe Trophy. But outside of that, he won 0 individual awards. His only individual award is a Conn Smythe Trophy. He didn't play too much internationally, but again, look, I don't want to look. I love Lanny McDonald. I've met him ton of times. I just want to know why Mike Vernon's in and not Theo Fleury, because they both played on the same team.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think maybe we need to get on that Hall committee.
Yeah, I think so too. Because, well, I think to me personally, I think again, Alexander McGillney. You want to talk about Rob Brendamore. You want to talk about Jeremy Roenick. Jeremy Roenick's one of the all-time leading scorers in U.S. hockey history. That guy's not in.
But my very first glove save in my life came against Jeremy Roenick.
There you go.
Fun fact, by the way. And we're going to end it at that. So thank you, Jim, for joining us. We will be back. John and I will be back tomorrow to talk probably more Celtics and maybe more NBA. The NBA draft is tonight. But don't wait or don't worry, because tonight Jim and Chris are going to be back for more hockey talk right here on Full Press coverage and fullpresshockey.com. So thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and we'll talk to you then.